Welcome to Breaking Par with Bernard Sheridan, the golf instruction podcast that helps you take control of your game. Now, here's your host, the founder of Par Breakers Golf Academy and certified Golf Channel Swing Fix instructor, Bernard Sheridan.
EA, welcome to Breaking Par. Thanks a lot for being with us today.
It's a real pleasure. I've been looking forward to this. It's taken a while for us to get this all scheduled up.
Yeah, well, you're a real busy guy now. You're now, since I've last seen you, and I guess it's been probably a little bit over a year. I think I saw you around April of 2014. I came down to take the biodynamics course with you and Mike Adams, which was a super eye-opening thing for me and has really changed the way I look at the golf swing. So I thank you for that. And then since then, you've been attached with Fox Sports. A lot of different things has happened for you, and to me, that's super thrilling. And congratulations on all those milestones. I know it's to the world, it looks like you're an overnight success, but I know that it's probably been 20 years of hard work and digging in and doing everything that you can. And just for our audience, I just want to let them know that knowledge-wise, you're probably one of the smartest guys in this game that there is. And I'm sure that as time moves on, you're going to get even more and more recognition to what major contributions you're making to this game and really making it so much easier for people to play.
I really appreciate those comments. And you're right, it's a long journey. It's a lot of work, and really, it's a lot of sharing. You don't get to a position where you have knowledge without working with other people, sharing with other people. Mike Adams is one of the best in the industry. He surrounds himself with good people. He shares. He encourages all to share. Not knock each other down. Try to find a way to make each other better. And so, success comes with a lot of help. And it's not just one person sitting out there on his own in a field somewhere studying and swinging a golf club. Getting to where they really have an understanding of a lot of different ways to get the job done.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and I know that since over the past 3 years, since I've gotten more involved and in touch with other instructors and have had conversations with them and have gone to certification programs and have been on Facebook in these groups and shared knowledge and what I know and what they know, you just grow tremendously. And I think that a lot of the people who are involved in those type things who, like you said, share that information are really the most knowledgeable people out there and are so open and willing, like yourself, to help others. And I think that really what that does is that's what really is the game is about. And to grow the game, it really makes a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of it is you have to be willing to put it out there and be challenged. I've never been afraid to be challenged in my career. And years ago, back in the 80s, I'm telling people swing with your right hand only. Practice the feeling with your right hand. If your right hand's your smart hand, it's your dominant hand. You really want to get control in your right hand. Of course, everybody back then was no, swing with your left hand. You got to pull with the left hand. And they never asked questions like, well, why? Why would you use your non-dominant hand instead of your dominant hand? Well, they say it's like in tennis. It's your backhand's stronger than your forehand. And I played competitive tennis till I was 18, and every competitive tennis player I know said that their forehand was stronger than their backhand. So where'd that come from? And why do we have a two-handed backhand instead of a two-handed forehand? So you have to be willing to challenge the paradigms, and you have to be willing to be challenged yourself. And of course, the more you're challenged, the more you're able to explain intelligently why things work the way they work. And a lot of people sort of run from that. And I've never been one to do that. I've always figured, if you have the resolve and you have a committed, path, then you should be able to explain that. Now, it doesn't mean that because something works, that something else doesn't work. In other words, there can be two sort of seemingly conflicting approaches that both work. Now the question becomes, who do they work for? Because they won't work for everybody, but they do work for somebody. And now the question becomes why. Like David Duval, number one in the world, he was what I called a front acre golfer. Well, he was convinced that it wasn't the right way to go. Now he had a lot of other things going on in his life. I don't say it's just the golf swing, and he had some injuries from, I think, snowboarding accidents or something like that. But the fact is his ball striking wasn't as good when he moved away from a certain type of swing that his body's built to do.
Yeah, no, absolutely, I agree, and I believe that the people who are the most committed are always questioning, because what that does is it allows you to look at it from a different way, and not just accept. And I know that when I got into the industry, that's a big reason why I did. When I was going and working with different instructors and trying to better my swing, what I found a lot was they would say, well, you want to do this, or you want to do that, or you want to create this much lag, or you want to do that. And then I would say, okay, well, why do I want to do that? And they couldn't tell me why. And they really didn't have a definitive answer that broke it down into logical information that I could understand. So what that told me was that either they kind of didn't really understand it totally themselves, or they just bought into this is how you do it and that's it. So I was always the type of person to try to find several different ways to do things, because I know that, and I learned this even more so when I took the course with you, that not everybody is the same, and not everybody thinks alike, and not everybody's body works the same way. Right. So that can really, be a completely different thing. So, and I know that with some of the things that you guys, you and Mike Adams have in this program, that you're kind of, and I know that you guys are really busy and you can't do it on a regular basis. Usually it's like once or twice a year you have these certification programs, and then a lot of instructors are able to get an idea really and open their eyes to that, hey, there's so many different ways to swing the golf club, and here's why there's so many different ways. That's what's so incredible. Give us a little bit of insight on this program for our listeners out there in Par Nation.
Yeah, so Mike and I met, I think it's about 6 years ago now, and we actually had mutual friends that were trying to get us together for at least 15 years. And it just never happened. I was living in Hawaii, traveling in Asia, and he is on the East Coast, and we were just so far away from each other. But when he actually gave me a call, and he said, hey, I'd like to meet you. Can I come out and spend some time with you? And I said, great. He got on a plane, flew out to California, stayed with us in our condo for a few days, and we really spent 3 days talking golf. And as he says, I think we slept 12 hours in 3 days. And but we met, and we found out that everything that we were doing really aligned with each other, and we gave each other examples of other people that were out there doing similar stuff also. And we said, we really need to kind of create a motion to get people understanding that there are a lot of different ways of doing this. So basically, we had a second meeting. We sat down at dinner. We shook hands. We decided it was going to be called. Originally, it was going to be bio-based swing dynamics, and bio being the body. That's the basis for what we're looking at. It is a swing. It is a swinging action, and we're really looking at the dynamics of what's going on. So figured out it was too long of a name, so we cut it down to bio-swing dynamics. And but the idea here is that when we look at the body and how the body is organized to make the golf swing, we have a structural design. So if we look at the actual anatomy and how the muscular system, the ligaments, the tendons tie everything together, and how they have just their basic operation, how does it work for each individual? Well, there are these features that we could identify that everybody has. There's 12 of them, and they don't all work exactly the same way. As a matter of fact, each of the 12 features has 3 options. So let's pick a simple one. Let's just look at your balance distribution in your body, especially in your hip girdle. Well, you can rotate around your left hip joint, you can rotate around your right hip joint, or you can rotate more around your center. And keep in mind that everything happens on a continuum. It's a matter of degrees. So if you're balanced more front side, and if you're a right-handed golfer, that'd be your left side, If you're balanced more on that side, well, you may have 60-40, let's say, balance distribution in your weight at address. Now, pressure changes as we swing, so it's not a true pressure distribution. And a lot of people started calling it like front load, stuff like that. I don't really like the term front load, just because, you're starting there, but as soon as you move, you're not loaded there anymore. You will maintain that balance alignment, and so that's why I call it anchoring. You find a way to stay anchored in that alignment, even though the pressure's shifting in your feet. So, but you could be, 80-20 front to rear, 70-30, 60-40, anywhere along the continuum. I actually explained this whole anchoring system, front, center, and rear to Mac O'Grady back in the Queen Mary Open in the early 90s. And that actually all started, kind of his way of changing and looking at things. And we only had a short conversation, it was about 2.5 hours, but he went away and did all his own research. He ended up developing a front anchor Hogan model. He had a center anchor Sneed model, and then he actually built a rear anchor Trevino model. And he actually taught those for about 5 or 6 years. And then eventually him and Mike and Andy ended up going in the front direction. But they're valid systems. And look at Tom Kite. He was actually front way back in his heyday, or in the early on in his career when he was Mr. Second. He shifted over to a rear anchor rotary model, and boom, he won the U.S. Open in '92. So, just understanding what your balance alignment is and what really works best for you. And you can see it in the game. Ernie Els is very centered. It's pretty clear the people that are front balanced now. It's pretty clear the people that are rear balanced. So why is it that they play well when they do that? Well, they're actually built to do that, and we can screen you and we can show you exactly why it is that you're built to do that. Years ago, I wrote a book on my first book talking about this, and I actually said someday there'll be something like an MRI or an X-ray or something, and they'll actually be able to tell us why we're built to do this. Well, they have it now. It's called a DEXA scan. It's been around for a while, but it actually shows you what the body mass distribution is. So if you have more distribution on the front side of your body when you're looking from the face-on view, then you're going to be a front loader or front anchor or front post, whatever you want to call it, type of golfer. That's what you're built to actually do. And so you're going to play your most efficient golf from there. Now, because we're human, we are adaptable, and we are athletic, we can sort of override what we're built to do most efficiently, and we can find ways to play and even play while doing that, but ultimately we're going to have injuries, and we're going to get hurt doing that. So we want to avoid that at all costs. So we have this structural design, and we can screen you to show you all the things that you're built to do. Now, you also have this dynamic organization. So when you're young and you're growing up and you go through those 2 developmental spurts, as a junior, you develop a sort of an operating system for your athleticism. That's your dynamics. That's how your dynamic system wants to operate. And again, and this is where actually sort of the future of bioswing dynamics is growing, and that we're getting better and better at screening those activities. Do you need more vertical force, or how do you apply vertical force? Because you look at a Bubba Watson applying vertical force, it's pretty obvious.
Oh, absolutely. Bubba has tremendous amount of verticals. He just won, actually, yesterday in a playoff. And for our listeners, we always tape this show, and then the show is aired anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks out. So right now we're in June. We're the week after the U.S. Open, and Bubba just won. This is a guy who has so many verticals. That's why you see him when he's hitting a ball. He looks like he's jumping up in the air, and that's really what's going on there. Yeah,
and the thing is that he's applying vertical force with a lot of vertical activity is a way to say it, like doing a jump squat or a turning jump squat. We see a lot of golfers whose heels come off the ground, but people don't realize that you look at a player like a Hunter Mahan or Gary Woodland, they still have tremendous vertical force, but they use it differently. They actually start leaning it away. It actually starts angling a little bit more horizontal, and it creates what we call a moment arm, a greater moment arm, which gives them more torque, and that's why they look more rotary. You look at a player like Rory McIlroy, he double dips. He does both very well, and that's why for pound per pound how long he is. So, but these are the dynamics now. We're understanding dynamically how we are working. And then we have functional issues. You look at TPI, Paul Check, Pete Vygotsky, you can go down all these different systems where they were looking at the functional issues of the body. Did we have an injury? Can we improve that area? Is it something we just have to deal with? Well, we have to understand functionally how it's going to influence the way the swing works as well. So ultimately, we're trying to make sure the swing fits our structure. It's using the dynamics that we've already developed, because it's very actually hard to change those dynamic patterns. You can improve their output, but it's hard to change them. And then we want to look at the functionality. Are we actually functionally working as good as we can, and can we improve that?
Well, doesn't your body, I mean, your body wants to work best in a certain way. And that's why when we see players get injured, it's because they're trying to do something that their body is truly not capable of, but they're instructed to do it because they're told, as we went back to in the beginning of the show, that this is the way you do it. So the wonderful thing about this whole system is that it really lets that individual have a true understanding as to why they do it that way and why this way will be the best for them to maximize their power, their ground force, their leverage, their swing plane, and everything else that they're capable of doing. And pretty much it is going to be a lot easier for them to do. As an instructor, I know in my end of it, it's like getting a fillet as opposed to a porterhouse. And I don't have to trim away all the fat now and then figure out what's what and then get the fillet part out of the porterhouse and then get the New York strip part out of the porterhouse. Now I know, hey, I got exactly what I need. I ran through this test and I know exactly what this guy or gal needs. And now I've really saved not only a tremendous amount of time to accelerate the learning process for them, but I've saved them a ton of money too. And to me, anytime that I can save one of my students a ton of money, it's a victory all around, because now we can help them and they're going to be able to tell other people that we can accelerate this process, and they're going to send more people to me. And everybody wins.
Yeah, to me, it's never been about having the student come back. My whole goal is to get the student as self-sufficient as fast as possible. Now, we're humans, we have busy lives, we have schedules. Even when you get somebody to a point where they understand what it takes to be self-sufficient, they're still going to have hiccups, in the process over time. They're going to come back, but their checkups are like 10 or 15 minutes most of the time. And then we spend, like if they come for a half hour or an hour, whatever it is, the checkup's 10 or 15 minutes, they're back in order. Then I actually spend most of the rest of the lessons distracting them, and so they have to get themselves back into the focus and distract them, get them back in, because that's how we play golf. And it actually gets them preparing to be better players instead of just having better swings. So ultimately we want to understand what's the most efficient way for our body to swing. How can we get to that as fast as possible? Now, what a lot of people don't understand is that a basic concept that it takes force to create motion. And you brought up the ground force, and I talk to golfers in terms of their ground force pattern. And I don't mean what's the ground reaction force pattern and what does it look like and what does science tell us what it looks like. I mean, what does a golfer himself or herself feel like he or she does to put pressure into the ground? Because it's the actions that they're creating to put pressure into the ground that's important. But the key here is that when you get that ground force pattern right, your body wants to move in a certain direction. It wants to lever a certain way. It wants to torque a certain way. It wants to rotate a certain way. What we need to know is that when you do that, what's it going to look like for you? And if we know what it would look like for you if you did it your most efficient way, then we're not going to try to change something when we see it show up, which a lot of people do change. They want a certain look, and they don't realize that if this golfer is doing it the way that fits him or her the best, it won't look that way. It'll look another way, and that's okay. So, we're not trying to actually change golfers' swings as much as we are trying to allow their natural swing, go back to Bagger Vance, their authentic swing, to show up, and they feel a lot more comfortable doing that. We always get reports back that golfers say, wow, I used to practice a small bucket of balls, and I hurt that night. I woke up sore the next morning and stuff like that. Now I can practice 3 large buckets and I'm not sore at all. So it's got to be better for the body. They right off the bat pick up a lot more clubhead speed. I mean, in 5 minutes, 6 minutes, 10 minutes, we can get golfers 5 to 12 mile an hour more clubhead speed. And they're not trying to swing harder. They actually feel like they're doing less. So that's got to be a good thing.
Yeah, sure. Because if their body's working efficiently, then what's happening is they're not fighting themselves. It's not a struggle,
Right.
and that's when you feel like you're working harder. Is when you're
Right.
fighting your own body, and it's
That's
a
right.
big struggle. But when you're not, when you're doing everything that your body is meant to do, now it feels effortless and it feels easy to do. The other thing, as you mentioned, once they find that ground force pattern, it's easier for them to repeat that and create consistency in their swing. That's why some players, if they don't know, or I want to say most players, if they
Hmm.
don't know what that pattern is, then some days it just happens naturally. They're
Right.
relaxed. Their body's doing. They're not trying to contrive anything or force anything to happen, and they play great. And they feel like they're not even trying. The next day, they might go out and shoot 15 shots worse. They're fighting themselves the whole time. They don't even know what's going on, and it's because they're not doing that same pattern that their body wants to do. So it's understanding once you can find that, know how to use it, utilize it. Now you can go back, and now it's starting to build a solid, consistent thing that you know what you have to do. You better understand what your body does and how it does it and how it can repeat doing it.
Yeah.
And who cares what it looks like? I mean,
That's
there's
right.
a lot of swings that look gorgeous, and there's a lot of swings that don't. But that's not what gets the ball in the hole.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So who cares? I mean, and I know that for me, I try to tell my students that don't worry about how pretty it looks. Worry about how functional it is, and how best it feels to you, and how it keeps you injury free. I mean, you might want to look like a certain swing, but you might not be that certain swing. Sometimes people are lucky enough that it happens that way. The swing
Right.
that they want to look like, that's what their body does, and it
Right.
really ends up working great. But if you look across the board at some of the greatest players in the world, every one of their swings, if you look at them, they look different.
They're unique. Yeah, they're unique. They have their own little idiosyncrasies, and they've allowed them to happen. I had the fortune of I was at the U.S. Open working for Fox, and I had dinner Sunday night with Tom Weiskopf. So hey, I'm going to take this opportunity. So I said, Tom, I said, as far as I know, you never changed your swing. Looked the same to me throughout your whole career. I said, so what did you work on? And his answer was fundamentals. He didn't care how it looked, you know, but he made sure that the fundamentals were happening, and if the fundamentals happen and the swing just looked the same over time, and the fundamentals were getting the job done, he was happy. So that's part of the process, is really understanding the fundamentals, and fundamentally, what do you need to do? We all have to manage face and force, with the club face. There's a fundamental. If you're not aware where the club face is facing and where the force of the club face is going, you're probably going to struggle with ball striking and ball flight control. You need some sort of pivot action, and you can't do that without being connected to the ground. So you have to understand how that ground force pattern, allows you to pivot. How do I get the pressure from foot to foot, and how does that influence my pivot, and what will my pivot look like when I'm moving? I mean, that's my basic, action in golf. I have to finish the pivot. If I quit on it, and it doesn't matter if it's a mini one or a full one, if I don't finish the job, I know I'm not doing a good job. I'm probably not going to get paid off very well in life if I don't finish the job well, and I need rhythm and timing. So those are the things that we all do, but we all look differently as we do them. Then those become what we call our preferences. Hogan actually said it really well, wrote it really well. And if you really read his stuff, like in 5 Lessons, he'll give you an idea of what sort of the ideal is. And then he'll mention like his grip. I had to move my grip away from that. I had to do this. But it was a preference, he said. He said it didn't really, affect the fundamentals. It didn't negate the fundamentals. It was just a preference that I needed to do for me to play the best golf. And he actually didn't feel like his swing was that close to ideal. He thought there were enough things, even his swing plane was far enough away from the ideal that, he said it's okay to be underneath the plane, just never be above the plane, sort of thing. But my preference is it has to be in this direction. So understand what things, you need to do fundamentally. Understand what your body's going to look like when you apply those fundamentals. And then from there, recognize that those idiosyncrasies are happening are because your body's unique.
Right, absolutely, and because of that too, it's the way that you're now the way that you're creating leverage and things like that, and what your body is doing, and how you release the club, things like that. That's going to dictate a lot of tying into swing playing too. Um,
Yeah.
let's just jump into that a little bit. Tell us a little bit about the swing plane and how it's just not one. And there's some people who think, okay, it's one plane or it's two plane, and that's true. But there's what are the variations of those planes and what can they be? And which one is right for you, and how do you know? I mean, we look at Matt Kuchar; he's very much, a one-plane swinger now, and it's worked very well for him. That's really biodynamically what his body wants to do, and he's getting rewarded by that. So for our listeners out there, give us a little bit of a deeper insight into really what kind of planes there are and how and why they're that way. Well, we know why they're that way because that's the way the person's body works. But I know that a lot of people, they think they're supposed to be swinging on a certain plane, and then they try to achieve that, and then that can end up actually being detrimental.
Right. Well, let's clarify really quickly the concept between one plane, two plane. In that basically that came from Jim Hardy's system. All he is really talking about is the lead arm. If the lead arm goes across the shoulder line, so it's right through the shoulder line, it's a one-plane system. And really, we're talking about at the top of the backswing and in the transition. If it is above the shoulder line, then the lead arm's at a different angle than the shoulder line. So now you got two planes, and so that's basically what he's talking about. So how much elevation do we have there? So, most people, when they talk about plane, are talking more about, is it the club head, the center of mass, the path that it transcribes throughout the swing or through a certain period of the swing? Is it the golf shaft? What's going on? So again, golf terms don't tend to work out very well because we define them differently and we argue about them. It's just like, let me diverge for a second here. It's just like the new ball flight laws, Well, you need an open club face to play a draw. Well, open to what? Because you need a closed club face to the path to play a draw. Now, if you want to play that draw at the target, the club face has got to be faced right of the target, if you're a right-handed golfer, to draw back to the target. So the club face has always had to been close to the force or the path, depending on, and I always called it force. There's another thing. What they call swing path right now, I call it force. Mm-hmm. So if I say swing path and I use it in a different definition, I'm wrong because I'm not using it in their definition.
Right.
We need to come to terms with each other. We need to say it in a way that we can understand each other and agree upon. So, like when it comes to the ball flight laws, I always say, well, if I'm a right-handed golfer, the face has to be facing right of the target if I want to play a draw, so I can start it right of the target, but the face also has to be close to the path so I can draw it back to the target. And the degree to which that needs to happen is based upon the degree of curvature that I want to have. Now, the old school guys and the new school guys will not argue with any of that. They will all say that that's correct. So now we've got this way of talking about it where we can agree with each other instead of being on Facebook and spatting at each other back and forth about really what the truth is. You have to know what the definition is first, right? So when we're looking at what we call planing, we're looking at a few different things. During the backswing, where does the shaft go, okay, during the backswing? Well, if I start back rotating my hips and I have any sort of pitch or inclination in my hips, and I rotate from the hips, the club is going to want to seek a path around my hip girdle. And it's going to seek a path up and around the pitch that I have in my hip girdle. So think of a ball on a string. If I hold a ball on a string, I spin it around and around and around and around. The rotational force is cutting a plane through space. Okay?
Yep.
So in a sense, the physics of planing is how does rotational force swing the center of mass or the shaft around our body?
Right.
If my hip rotation is the strongest force at any given time, the club is going to want to seek a plane around my hip girdle at the inclination that I'm inclined at. Well, if my shoulder rotation takes over at some point, because my hips may only turn 45 degrees in the backswing, and then my shoulder rotation takes over, well, now it's going to want to elevate up to a plane around my shoulders, and thus the arm folding and getting leverage. It's a good thing all these things work together, because the universe kind of figured that all out for us a long time ago. We didn't figure it out.
That's true.
So the way the arm folds up and the way the shoulders rotate, how much tilt and turn do they have, is going to determine how high that is sort of at the top of the backswing. So that's going to influence it rotating more around the shoulder girdle. Now, the length of your arms. If your arm length is really long, in relation to your height, well, your hands are going to want to elevate more than average going up just to keep you in balance. Well, there's your two-plane guy. His hands go up really high. The lead arm goes above the shoulder line. If your arms are about the same length as your height, well, you're going to be more in a neutral, area, which means the arms are going to tend to go more through the shoulder line at the top of the backswing. If you have alligator arms, you probably aren't going to elevate very high. So your lead arm will probably be below your shoulder line at the top of the backswing. So these are things that influence where the hands are at the top of the backswing. So really, as you start your backswing, are you rotating from your shoulders? Are you rotating from your hips? Are you rotating from your torso? Those things are going to determine exactly what plane you take it away on. Call it your takeaway plane if you want. Once the takeaway plane is in action, the arms are going to elevate as the body continues to rotate. That's going to take you up to another plane. Okay. Now from there, what happens during the downswing? A player whose hips wait for the arms to sort of drop down, well, they're going to drop it down to a much lower plane like a Sergio Garcia. But then what does he do? He really rotates his hips through the ball. So he's bringing the club down through the ball on what we would call a hip plane slot. So during the downswing, we're mainly calling a slotting action, because how do we get to that slot? A player who's very shoulder rotary at the from the top is going to bring it more down on the shoulder plane. And so then we have torso planers. I always use Jimenez as an example of a torso planer. It's pretty clear he's a torso planer. He's got his torso hanging out there for the world to see. And that's how he plays the game, right? So during the downswing, what we're looking at these slotting zones that match where your most dynamic rotary activity is, or another way of saying it is what area of your core are you engaging. So there are what we call lower core players, middle core players, and upper core players. And Dr. David Wright out of California has got some great research on this. And again, his research is aligning perfectly with what Mike and I have seen over the years. There's a group out of Japan called Four Stance Theory, and their information is aligning right with what ours is showing as well. So, it's the science is proving that it works this way. And so, if you engage your upper core, you look at a Cabrera, you look at both Stadlers, Craig and Kevin. Pretty clear these are upper core people. And why are they so vertical, with their slotting plane coming down? Why is it more in the shoulder zone? Because they're upper core guys. Sergio's a lower core player. You look at Hunter Mahan, a lower core player. That's why their shaft returns to where it was at address. Mo Norman was a center core player. Well, he set the shaft up in his center core address so he could keep it as close to that plane as possible during his golf swing. But your core region, you actually have what we call a dynamic core region. That whatever your dominant core region is the one that you want to work with. Now, hopefully, your dynamic core region is the one that matches that athleticism we said we developed as a junior. And then we have this structural core region, one that matches your structure, like upper core people, a lot of people with Scandinavian descent, a lot of wood chopping and stuff through history,
right.
Swinging big swords, whatever it is. These people genetically are built to be upper core people, You go to other parts of the world, they're genetically built to be lower core people. We see a lot of that, happening out there. So you need to know what is your dynamic core region, what is your structural core region. And by the way, it works out the best and the most efficiently when your dynamic core region and your structural core region match each other. So I'm an upper core guy. I was a gymnast. I did the rings, the high bar, and the pommel horse. So at a very young age, my dynamic core region that I developed matched my structural core region. And somehow, by the way, my gymnastics coaches knew that. And they actually put me in those areas, and it worked out very well for me. So, but we have to understand that the way the club planes, or whether you're looking at club head or you're looking at shaft, it's largely determined by what core region is the most active, and that actually will create activity around that region, which wants to plane the club around that region. I know that's kind of technical, but that's really what's happening. And by the way, when you swing a golf club, you don't have to think about any of this.
Oh, no, absolutely. You don't want to think about anything when you're swinging a golf club. I mean, that's the worst thing to do because, of course, if you're trying to think about something, it sends mixed signals. So it's, and we could get into a whole conversation about the way the brain works and how thinking can really get you in trouble,
Right.
and why that happens. But we'll leave that for another show because we're actually winding down here and coming to the end of our segment. But this has just been some wonderful information. And I thank you so much for taking the time out to share this with the Par Nation audience, because this is just absolutely gold as far as I'm concerned. There is just so much that this information reveals to players of all different levels so that they can maximize what they do. They don't have to totally understand it.
Right.
They just have to embrace it, and then they'll find that their swing and everything that they're trying to do will all just fall into place kind of very much naturally. And also too, they'll have a much longer golfing I want to say life, because they'll be able to play longer because they won't create injuries, and their body will be in much better condition overall to play on a regular basis as they get older.
Yeah, ultimately, no matter how much information we know, what I'm trying to do with students on the lesson tee and on the golf course is get them set up better. I call it set up for success. So find a way to set up for success their way, trigger their swing with that pressuring, that ground force activity. From there, finish the job off well, and the motion will connect the start to the finish. And we just need to know what it looks like. And if they can do that, and then they can learn how to focus well, which we'll get to in another episode maybe someday.
Yeah, definitely. We definitely want you to come back. I know that you're such a busy guy, and that's because you're such a bright guy, you're so intelligent, and you have so much insight into the game. Like I mentioned in the beginning, I can't say enough good things about you, EA, because I think that as a brilliant mind, you're going to go down in history as one of the top in this industry. There's no doubt in my mind at all.
Well, thank you. Those are very kind words. I appreciate it.
Well, I only speak the truth. So it's I'm not trying to make you feel better. I'm just telling you how it is. So, and that's a lot of the way I am as a person. It's probably because my initials are BS, so which really means I don't BS too much. I cut through that because it's not necessary. We let people know exactly where they stand, and as far as I'm concerned, you're at the top. So thanks so much for really taking the time. And for all our listeners out there, keep an eye out for EA on Fox Sports. His insight is incredible. And as you get to know more about him, you're going to find that you're going to learn so much about this sport that it's nuts. For our nation out there who is listening, how can they get in touch with you? What's the best way if they want to work with you, or just send some questions your way to be able to learn from your vast well of knowledge?
My website is www.newhorizonsgolf.com. NEWHORIZONSGOLF.com. I have a YouTube channel, EA Golf Pro, and you can get me right through my website. My phone number and email is on there. I'm also the director of instruction at Olympia Fields Country Club outside Chicago. My first season there, so look forward to seeing you there if you get in contact with me. And again, thanks for having me, and everybody out there, take care.
Yeah, it was great. So, and what we always say in parting here is try to keep it in the short grass. I know you do that anyway.
I do my best.
All right, take care, EA. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.